My name is Gasser Hisham. I'll be your moderator for this panel. So actually, I come from more of a corporate legal standpoint with a background with more than 13 years of experience in the fast-moving consumer goods or FMCG sector and the oil and gas. However, like 6 months ago, I decided to take 1 year sabbatical leave from the from the multinational corporate world and the legal world, and I decided to start doing my master's in sustainable development at the University of Sussex. And I'm also have the privilege of joining YouThinkGreen Egypt, the organization that is actually organizing this panel as their sustainability advisor. So if you can, and I would like now to introduce our inspiring panelists that I'm actually honored to share this panel with. So the first speaker is Mohannad Abouelrouse. Mohannad is the founder and CEO of two organizations. The first is Life from Water. It's an international nonprofit delivering clean water and agricultural solutions to empower underserved rural communities in Egypt, as well as in regional focus in Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania. And he has more, his company has more than 100 projects implemented with a wide range of customized water solutions, such as the water tap connections, water treatment units, as well as solar powered wells and water pans. Mohannad is also the co-founder and CEO of WaterWell, which is a startup that innovates sustainable and cost-efficient water solutions for both the rural and premium markets through a combination between ceramics and nanotechnology. Mohannad has earned his bachelor's degree from the German University in Cairo and his MBA at the Edinburgh Business School, Heriot-Watt University. Pleasure, Mohannad, nice to be with you. The second, next slide, please. Can we move to the next slide? It's easy. Okay, thank you. So our second speaker is Nouran Sayed. Nouran is the co-founder and business development director of Plug and Grow, which is an agri-tech startup that provides precision agriculture solutions based on hydroponics and aquaponics. She's also the co-founder of Zon Gardens, which is an enterprise established to promote the collaboration between businesses and academia in the field of green technologies, serving the water, energy, and food sectors in the Euro-Mediterranean region. Also, Nouran, formerly, she led the business development division of Agrimatic Farms, Egypt's first and one of the largest aquaponic farms in the MEA region, with a production capacity of 4 million pieces of lettuce annually. Nouran studied political science and psychology in the American University of Cairo, AUC. Again, welcome and pleasure to have you on the panel, Nouran. Can we go to the next one, please? So our next panelist is Ragy Ramadan. Ragy is the founder and CEO of both NoorNation, which is the first Egypt-based African clean energy startup, which is focusing on bridging the life essentials through decentralized renewable energy and green energy. And also, he is the founder and CEO of Green Energy Academy, which is an Egypt-made international company that delivers world-class renewable energy services. He's also an entrepreneur, member of the US Association of Energy Engineers, and an AEE certified renewable energy professional. He's also a certified ambassador of sustainable development appointed by the Ministry of Planning and Economic Development in Egypt. Over the course of 12 years, Ragy, and through his startups and organization, has managed to deliver clean energy to different remote areas, as well as solar energy and capacity building programs to over 300 trainees across Egypt, Tanzania, Iraq, Germany, and Saudi Arabia. It's a pleasure to have you, Ragy, with us. I hope you managed to join. I didn't see, but I hope yeah, you did. Our next panelist is Hamisa Gabri. Hamis is a young agri-tech entrepreneur concerned about resilient and sustainable agriculture, with a particular emphasis with a particular emphasis on providing solutions to water scarcity, food security, and climate change challenges. Hamis is part of the founding team of Mozera, which is the leading agri-fintech startup in Egypt, which works on bridging or making sure the farmers in different Egyptian communities can benefit from the agri-tech technologies. It's also nice to have you, very nice to have you, pleasure to have you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
Can we move, please? Next one. Our final panelist is Nada Bakri. Nada is a colleague at both YouThinkGreen Egypt. So she's a project lead at YouThinkGreen Egypt, as well as a colleague at the Sustainable Development Masters at the University of Sussex. And she's also a current member of the Public Policy Hub, which is a GAPP school of the American University in Cairo. She's working on the evaluation and monitoring of the National Adaptation and Mitigation efforts, with 1 year experience in modern agriculture and a graduate of the Bachelor's of Biotechnology from the German University in Cairo. Nada is leading influential projects at YouThinkGreen. Among them are the climate resilience, the climate launchpad. Again, welcome to the panel, and looking forward to your participation, Nada.
Thank you.
Okay, so to kick off the panel, my first question. What would be the definition of resilience in each of your areas, and how could it be achieved in your opinion? So I will start in the order actually on my screen. So Nouran.
So that's a big question we're starting from. Okay, so if we're talking about resilience, my focal area is agriculture and food production, basically. So from our perspective, or from the grower's perspective, basically, resilience here represents different techniques and technologies that they can adopt that can allow them to basically mitigate or eliminate some of the risks they face in general in the agricultural sector related to climate change, water scarcity, increase of costs, for instance, for elements like fertilizers, energy, and so on. Of course, another aspect that is a little bit broader, but also important, it's the diversification in general, because more often than not, growers, or the smaller the grower is, they focus on one or two crops that they're growing, even if it's seasonal. But with that comes a lot of risks in the light of the changes and the unexpected or unprecedented trends that we see in the agricultural sector. So there are a lot of elements that basically add up to the resilience of the grower, and a lot of techniques and technologies that we can basically look into and promote.
Thank you. So Mohannad, what would be the definition of resilience in your area, and how do you think we can make it happen?
Thank you, Gasser. So in my area, basically with water, but more into the drinking water. So the resilience is how they can cope with the different hazards that come to quality, quantity, of water into their houses in different rural communities across Egypt. And this is, in Egypt, it's different. Each area in Egypt has its own challenge, whether it's quality, quantity, and so. But the resilience here, how they cope, because at the end of the day, there's no option. They need to have the water today. So what they do is just how they can get cost-efficient water solution, water alternatives, or cost-efficient ways to clean the water if the issue is the quality, or to get a better water solution on a community level also. So you can find in many villages around Egypt, each village has its own dynamics, and with that dynamic, they have their own solution, whether they have a small water treatment unit, they have some water filters like the one we do, or they can fundraise together to get a clean water source connected to the government, the pipes of the government. And in many cases, because of the expansion in the population, as well as the decreasing dependency on the Nile, the quantity of water is not enough. Then this is a huge issue that they collectively need to work in.
Very insightful. Thank you, Mohannad. Moving to Hamis. So the same question.
So I think and like the answer would be adding to what Nouran has said, because I also work in agriculture, especially with the small farmers. And when it comes to small farmers, like you need to mitigate the risk of the climate change and be more climate resilient to an affordable level also. So you need to focus on the technology, the smart agriculture technology and its implementation, but also focus on the affordability of those technologies. So you want the farmer to accommodate using new practices and be more agri-resilient, but also you don't want to cut from his income, because this income is already so little. So this is our focus in Muzara, and we're trying to offer those kind of solutions and like have help the farmer be more adaptable to using technologies with an affordable prices, and also get a margin of profit that is higher. So in order to have more resilient sustainability, you need to mitigate and like make sure that also there is a business sustainability in the way. So this is how to mix.
Thank you, Hamis. Very insightful as well. So Nada.
Hi, Gaston. Hi, everyone. I think coming from YouThinkGreen is more of a social enterprise, speaking about the civil society and so on. The typical focus of a civil society or social enterprise would be tackling the issues and creating business opportunities and giving power to the emergent and vulnerable groups. However, in YouThinkGreen, there is a lot of accelerators and incubators that focus on creating a pool of startups that are all within the clean tech line of startups, and providing like the mentorship that they would need to enter the market. I think the main issue that may be facing these startups that are the graduates of our projects is basically investments, and finding the right investor and the interest of an investor. So yeah, I think that's mainly what we cover.
Thank you, Nada. So my next question would be, so what are the biggest climate risks currently that you see currently, and as well as anticipated or like foreseen in the near future, again facing Egyptian communities that each of you work with? So Hamis, do you want to take this?
Yes, sure.
Like the existing risks and the foreseeable ones in the future.
So right now with the small farmers, we face a lot of challenges when it comes to adapting to the climate change. We see like high peaks of temperature. The water are more contaminated with pesticides or fertilizers from the excess uses. Also, there is some kind of crops that's not anymore planted in their own seasons. So we have seasonality changes in Egypt, and also soil contamination. So we have different points of risks that we're facing with the farmers in Egypt, and especially the small farmers. Like the emphasis of all those risks are higher on him, because as I mentioned, the affordability part is different. So now what we're seeing is the farmer might plant a crop and then the climate is really, really changing and the heat waves hit this crop and then he loses all his production, which is directly impacting his income and which might affect his own decision of continuing farming or not. Like we see a lot of shifts from agriculture into other industries because the practices that we're using are not resilient enough, or maybe like those practices need to be more improved, and the small farmer needs to be looked at with a vision of how to improve his whole cycle. So like a 3,060 services around the farmer in order to provide more production, in order to have an income that's sustainable or stable. But also the foresight is, I believe that the agriculture map is going to change in the whole world. So like we used to plant banana and like mangoes, maybe like it's going to be shifted from Egypt to other countries because like it's really, really changing. It's a fact. It's not something that we can just see as a future might be. It's a fact.
Very true. Very true, Hamis. Nouran, since you're working in the same sector, so what do you think?
One of the things, I will add to what Hamis was saying. One of the things that we've seen recurring in so many areas and with so many growers is that we see appearance of pests that haven't really appeared in Egypt for 5, 6, 10 years. So that is something that requires, for instance, that growers are equipped with tools where they can somehow predict something like this or forecast something like this. Luckily, we started seeing a number of ventures who are starting to work in this sphere, supporting the different type of growers, basically. We started seeing as Hamis was saying, shocks in production because of the heat waves, for instance, or the shift in seasons or stuff like this, which is affecting whole crop ranges and whole farms, if we can say so. But this then also coupled with something that is not directly climate, but it comes in the agriculture sector as a fact, which is the increase in price of energy and fertilizers and pesticides and so on. So that really creates a huge burden, a huge financial burden on the grower. And that is what makes their business at a great risk, because the question, as Hamis said, is whether they will continue growing for another season or not. Because even if we're going out of the smallholder farmer scale, even the medium scale farmer is facing a number of challenges and a number of increased costs that are very threatening to their business and to their sustainability. And with the larger scale growers, they have the resources and the tools and the access to actually start working on this or suffering some losses, basically. But this is affecting a lot of, it's affecting the sustainability of so many agribusinesses at the moment.
Very true, very true. And I think this is where both your startup and Hamis is actually to help do our best to finance this. Okay.
Yes.
Thank you. Mohannad, what about the water sector?
The water sector, it's at the end of the day, it will be connected to the agriculture sector as well. But the biggest challenge here is the quantity of fresh water, the quantity of clean water, with the climate impact, the quantity of the water coming to the Nile, the quantity of rainwater, not just in Egypt, in Africa as well. And Egypt, they don't have that much water like in other African countries, but they have the percentage of utilization of that rainwater is very low. So because of that, the cost of clean water is becoming more and more and more for drinking and for agriculture and for other purposes. But before that, on the basic level, for the drinking, coming to the underground water as well. So Egypt, in addition to the Nile and the rain, Egypt depends on a good quantity on the groundwater. And with the climate change, the level of the groundwater is becoming lower and lower, which becomes harder to the rural communities to get water, because in many villages around Egypt where there is no network connected, they just have the small pumps pumping water from the underground, which is very contaminated as well. So the quantity here affecting the quality, and of course, and then like the domino affect all the other stuff after that. So I think this is the biggest, from my area, this is the biggest challenge, and a lot of strategies on the different levels need to be done in order to be resilient in that area.
Thank you. Do you foresee anything on top of this happening in the future if you don't intervene in time, especially in the water sector?
For myself, yes, of course. So it's already there. So the government, and so they are depending now on the water desalination and so on. So if the mitigation is not in time in the right quantities, and in order to compensate the difference, so a lot of people, and we see this in Upper Egypt, there's a lot at whole communities with no water sources at all, and maybe they get water just once a day or once a week in many places in Qena, for example, because there is no enough water and the network. So this is already you are facing now, and in the future, if there is no mitigation and there is no alternative solution to quantity-wise on the masses, there will be a lot of challenges.
Yeah, very, very clear. Thank you, Mohannad. Nada.
Okay, I think I don't have like a specific sector. I'll be talking generally about the civil society and the inclusion. I think one of the main problems the civil society or social enterprises face is the not being approached in a participatory manner within whether the monitoring system or the reporting system or the verification system, and this increases the lack of voice for the upcoming and emergent, whether by startups or interest within the field of taking part in the mitigation or the adaptation efforts to climate change. So I think this itself decreases the interest within the field and causes a lot of problems. It just holds you back. So yeah, I think I tried to cover it from the civil society's point of view.
Very true. Thank you, Anna. My next question would be, what are the key measures currently implemented to face these risks that you guys have already mentioned? And what are the measures that are still needed to be implemented, and how urgently? Of course, time is of the essence, but if you can highlight what's already the efforts that you and as well as other organizations have already put in place in Egypt to try to respond or to build resilience in these areas, and then what's still needed and how urgent. Who wants to go first?
Well, I could go first. Okay, so what we do is basically hydroponic technology. And this is one of the applications where you're able to provide the grower, where the grower is basically able to mitigate and adapt to so many changes that are going on. For instance, because mostly the applications of hydroponics or even aquaponics or any kind of soilless agriculture is done in a closed system, at least so far, most of the application. And that here overcomes the challenge of the climate shocks, the change in season, even the newer pests that are recurring or coming up. But also more importantly, it allows the grower to kind of shift from making ends meet, which has been the case for the past 2 years maybe, to being actually profitable and growing their business in a sustainable, scalable manner. Because they can start expanding from the local market to the export, if they're export even more, or export in other seasons than the traditional seasons they're working on, and so on. What we have been working on for some time, and that is a progress actually that we can see on the ground now, is that we're now able to provide financing solutions for our growers, because one of the biggest challenges for growers basically in adopting this type of technology is the capital cost. And this is something that has been facilitated with the help of so many entities like EBRD, Finance in Motion, and other different types of banks, and even other startups that are working on this. But there needs to be a policy framework that supports this type of transition, because at the end of the day, now this comes at the cost of the grower, and it also is based on their decision. There are a number of policies that are being formulated, for instance, in relation to water usage and their cost and so on. Water for Egypt, in Egypt, is for free. But I think now, in an effort to kind of limit that somehow, there's a number of policies that are targeting the water usage and all of this, which is going to start to push growers to become more aware of their consumption, become more aware of the tools that enable them to reduce their consumption and make it more economic and profitable for them. But we're still in need of more support in know-how, more support in education, basically, in capacity building of the growers, more support in services and functions that enable them to actually do this type of conversion or adoption. So yeah, there's some effort going on, but there's still a long way to go until the policy framework actually supports this entire approach, basically.
Very helpful. So when you say supporting basically the technical expertise and the know-how, who do you look for to provide this? Okay,
so for instance, there are so many research institutes in Egypt that work on hydroponic projects, for example. There is a lot of data out. There is data out there. Maybe it's not that much or encompassing so many crops, for instance, or different climates, but I think if we have some focus and support on this sector, this can start generating a lot of information and data and know-how that does not only help the hydroponic grower, but also the traditional grower. Because know-how in regards to the plant, their needs, their requirements, and all of this is something I need either way to grow anything, anywhere. It doesn't matter if it was in a controlled environment or not. Because even if it wasn't, I can still benefit from understanding how this plant works, how it reacts to a climate, how it reacts to different conditions, how it reacts to different pests, and so on. Because at the end of the day, this results in a higher cost if I'm not optimizing any of this, or if I'm not really assessing all of these elements. And in a great part, this goes back to the fact that the agriculture sector in Egypt is quite, has been quite underdeveloped in contrast to other more developed countries, basically, because we use very little amounts of technologies or data collection tools or data analysis tools. Yeah, and this is only a new introduction in the market for the past few years. But the basis is quite limited. And this is the kind of know-how that can be actually beneficial from all those research institutes and academic institutes and arms of the different ministries that actually deal with the smallholder farmers and so on. And that's kind of the space that I really think if we mobilize well, we'll be able to see a huge shift in the agricultural sector. Yani, for instance, in Egypt now, theoretically, there's classification or allocations of where you grow certain crops, but this isn't actually really applied on the ground. So this affects so many other elements in this entire cycle. And that's kind of what I mean by the supporting functions.
Very, very clear. Thank you very much, Nouran. Hamis, so first, you, from your perspective, let me know what measures have been implemented so far in the agri-tech or the agricultural sector, and if you care to share also like how the role of
unstable.
No worries. I was just reiterating the question. So you let me know like already the implemented key measures and projects to build resilience also from your perspective in the agricultural or agri-tech sector, and what do we need and how urgently do we need it, and if you can take a few moments to also respond to or complement Nouran's point on mobilizing finance to this sector, given like how a company like Muzera, for example, can help. Definitely.
Okay, so let me answer this question and I can dissect it a bit. So when it comes to governmental governmental level, there's like huge efforts from the government in order to be more agriculture resilient. So they're trying to work on this project for the canal lining to reduce the loss of water, especially with the water related to agriculture. Also, there is the huge effort and a huge fund for upgrading the irrigation network. Of course, you know, like we still have some fields that's flood irrigated and it's not drip irrigation. And there is a huge effort and money dedicated for this shift. So the government is doing a good effort when it comes to eliminating the whole kind of waste and like, you know, this kind of that's used to be in agriculture chaos. Now it's being more formalized or trying to be more formalized and on track. And when it comes to the private sector, like there's huge effort from the private sector, whether it's startup or whether already companies that's been working in the field. For the startup, as Nouran mentioned, there is Plan Grow, there is Muzera, there is Shetuzan, there is other startups each one is trying to focus in its own sector. So for instance, when it comes to the fertilizer, now we have a new fertilizer, the bioorganic waste, that's from the bioorganic waste of the compost, that is more, let's say it's a nutrient, it's a nutrient for the soil, but also it's like less chemical and less contaminated the soil. So why not shifting to those kind of fertilizers? For an instance, also there is the project related to using technology more in agriculture. So Muzera, what we're trying to do is trying to help the small farmer to benefit from the agriculture technologies, the smart agriculture technologies, satellite data, the sensors, if we can complement the cost of it. And there is also different startups working in IoT sensors and satellite data and giving recommendations to farmer in order to upgrade or like use more resilient practices in agriculture. But as I see it, it's not a one-man show. It's not a one startup effort. Those efforts need to be connected in a way and added together in the value chain in order to complement each other. It's not like a scattered offerings here and there. And it's not lined in a way that is adding more added value and systematic added value. And this is what we're trying to do actually in Muzera. We're trying to see who's with us in the value chain before and after and how we can partner with them in order to provide more solid service to the small farmer. And when it comes also to the implementation and like the steps to be taken in the future, currently I'm not in Egypt, I'm in Spain, in Alicante, and I've been in a farm visit. And there is a city here in Alicante, and there is a law for all the farmers to use IoT sensors in their land. It's an official law, it's a governmental law. It's not like a between us law, you know, like the informal one. Why is that? Because they measured the contamination in the lands here, and it was highly contaminated. The water was highly contaminated. The soil was highly contaminated. And then this law was issued in a very fast manner, and the farmers are abiding by it. They have the sensors and they measure what type of nutrients our lands need, and we're not going to add more nutrients than is required. By having this kind of collaboration between the farmer, the government, and also the startup who's providing the services, this is how we can complement the circles in Egypt. And also the financing part is important. As Nouran mentioned, we have two challenges. We have lack of data in agriculture. It's like the data, it's either not there or outdated, but there is some data and there is some research data. And there's some data about the market and the prices and the technologies and how it's efficient. But those data are not really communicated in a way that everybody can use it and everybody can build on this data. So I believe that effort here is really important, and it's crucial for the success of all the innovators and all the measures that we're trying to take, but also financing. So different financing entities are interested into financing the small farmers right now, but how to do it? Because when it comes to small farmers, as what we're working on with Muzera, it's a bit harder than large growers because like they're kind of bank and then you don't have history for those farmers, and the bank needs some sort of a list of assurance. So it's a two-way direction of the banks trying to loosen a bit their requirements to accommodate the farmers, and also the farmers to try to be more adaptable when it comes to it's like a one paper that you need to provide just work on it, because you will take this money and you will be using this money in a new effort that is more helpful for you and more impactful for the whole country. So it's like two ways direction. I always see it this way. And hopefully we can do more good in this sector in Egypt.
Yeah, hopefully, and let's stay positive. I think we with all our combined efforts, we would be able to do this. Thank you, Hamis. Mohannad, the water sector.
So yeah, at the beginning, I really like what the case in Spain with the census that Hamis said, because this is very crucial, very important on the larger scale. It's not that easy to implement, but if you are talking about the water sector in general, so the government is trying to monitor the underground water with doing monitoring systems on the borehole, so that we monitor that all the people having the borehole, they get the not so much quantity, so that the borehole can be refilled again. So if we have this legalized, so that all people with registered borehole have these systems, the government at the end, they can monitor actually the quantity of water, so that no one overconsume the borehole water, so that don't affect the underground water. So this is already some regulation in this area, but it will not that advanced like what Hamis said in the other case, but it will be a great potential if that is as well is done with the IoT. So this is regarding the underground water, for example. Another measures is with the rainwater harvesting, but this the government do some plans and so for in places like Matruh in order to harvest and not just harvest, but in order not to have a negative impact of the rain, like we see occasionally in some places like Aswan or so removing the negative impact and making the best out of it. In addition to that, of course, for the government as the big desalination units, and for the private and non-profits as well as what we do, doing water treatment unit, community-based water treatment unit to serve the communities far from Nile, or the communities depend on underground water with a lot of salt and microbiological contamination. So this is what is being done all over Egypt on different levels and different sectors. It has a negative impact, of course, doing treatment unit with the RO reverse osmosis, because at least you have a 40% waste, a lot of salty water that if you are not getting away that water in the right manner, it will affect the soil, it will affect all the underground, and there is a lot of negative practices in this as well. So this is on the medium and large scale with the water treatment unit, and in the smaller scale, like the cost-efficient water filters, to have a cost-efficient solution to get nearly affordable water, clean water, if I have contaminated water. So the quantity is fine, but the quality is not fine. So in rural communities, and so to have to be able to get access to clean water with affordable solution. In addition to this, there is a couple of innovations. One of them that is being done now on the larger scale, it's called liver bank filtration. This is a project we work with the National Water Company, where it's like a borehole with a unique design and unique criteria that need to be in a certain dimensions near to the Nile inside the government water treatment unit, so that it can double the production of the treatment unit without that huge investment. So, for example, the water treatment unit at each village or so, it can cost more than 20 million Egyptian pounds. The river bank filtration is like a borehole, and it filters the water from the Nile through the different layers of the soil. So the net output of that well, if done properly, will be the same quality like the water coming from the treatment unit. And the cost of that river bank filtration is 1 to 10 compared to the water treatment unit. So what we do, and what the National Water Company do in many cases, they connect that river bank filtration to the last stage of the water treatment unit after the treatment. So with 1 to 10 of the cost, we can double the water. So in many treatment units, you can get 30 liters per second. Now you can make it 60 liters per second with minimum cost. getting benefit of the design and the geographic location. So this is a huge intervention, and there is a lot of need throughout Egypt across the Nile that can be implemented. There is other innovations, but they are not that short term. There is a couple of companies doing them, which is the air water generator, so getting water from, harnessing water from the humidity in the air. But at the end, this can be used in places doing hydroponics and so, because in the hydroponics, the quality of water is the key point, not the quantity of water as it's closed system. But in other places, it's the energy of getting that water is a lot of energy. And of course, the energy, here we can't just talk about water or agriculture or energy separately. At the end, the three of them are connected. And the three of them must be in the plan, whatever the sector each one of us is working in. So the energy required to get that water is a huge dimension as well.
Thank you very much, Mohannad. It's very insightful, and definitely it triggers many follow-up questions that will go already with our with the next question. So thank you for this. Nada, given your work with different communities that are definitely the most affected by climate change risks and hazards in various parts of Egypt, so again, how would you describe the key interventions that you've witnessed so far, and what is needed and how urgently?
I think one of our major intended interventions is to increase the number of functioning and revenue-making startups through the different governorates, the 27 governorates. Our projects are not only Cairo-based, they are all over Egypt. Tackling climate change through the different sectors, through the different programs that we host or we create, starting from the pre-ideation phases, helping the interested personnel to combine and understand, and through design thinking, know more about what do they interest, how they can enter the market, and so on. And then that's one of our projects. We've been doing that for 4 years now, and we're very proud of. That's Climathon. It's more of Climathon Cairo, which is we create a community, and community actually grows really well because the graduates of the program can enter to the other one that's like a post-ideation. And then there is also an accelerator. So I think mostly what we try to do is intervene with the necessity of the startups or SMEs that are focused on climate change through entrepreneurial programs. And I think the major issue that we face is the lack of capacity, or the lack of data. And I think this is something that is witnessed across the different sectors. There's also the accountability in the process of privatization, which is essential, however difficult for small and growing companies. There's also the financing, of course. It's very essential. I think financing, in my opinion, is the #1 issue and the #1 cause of why startups do not continue and they just fail. They start up with 500 startups applications, and then the succeeding ones would be 1 or 2. And there's also the problem of lack of awareness. But I think through this year, because of hosting COP27, I think it's more out there that climate change is important, and mitigating it and adapting to it is very important. So we're trying to tackle the lack of awareness. And I think, however, in the smaller communities, this is something you do not really see. In different areas, there is no knowledge of climate change or its effects, the science behind the things that affects their day-to-day lives, from farmers to women and children and so on. So yeah, I think that's it in short.
Very helpful. Thank you, Nada. I'll be back to the last point shortly. Mohannad, so to implement these projects that and needed interventions that you actually comprehensively gave us an idea about. So what is the support needed from the private sector to finance these projects?
So yeah, this is a $100 million question. So again, it depends. So in many places, when the intervention is a large-scale intervention with a lot of initial cost, what can be done is water as a service, getting water as a service. So instead of the community paying of that water treatment unit, and of course they can't afford, and this is done in many places across Africa very successfully financial-wise. Getting water as a service means that as a private sector, I install the water treatment unit for free, yet the community get the water for affordable amounts that they can pay. And this is something Livebox can be doing, and this is something that we are doing now in a place in Kenya, for example, in an orphanage in a place called Gilgil. We implemented a water treatment unit in the orphanage, and then we did a water kiosk or a place outside the treatment unit where the community can sell water, not just I get that, but I can sell water to the near communities to get revenue so that I can maybe repaying that in the future. So seeing water as a service, it will be with the condition and the economic condition with the people at the bottom of the pyramid, could be an important, but not an easy thing to implement, because you need a lot of guarantees in order to do this investment, and it will have at the end a part of social part, not purely private sector. Another part is maybe in the other places where the intervention is not that high. It's not microfinancing, but maybe facilitation from an intermediate organization. So in many places in Egypt, to get official water pipes into my house registered in the National Water Company, I need to pay around 4,000 Egyptian pounds. In many places, it can reach 7,000 Egyptian pounds, which is a lot of money to be paid at once from a household that its income level is maybe less than 2,000 Egyptian pounds per month. So they just don't have this option. They wait to the non-profits to implement that project to them, or they just get water from the alternative contaminated sources. But what if we do some installments in the middle, whether it's the National Water Company or intermediate financial institution, where I can make that household pay the next 7,000 Egyptian pounds overall 2 years or so. It will make it very easier for them, and it can intervene with a lot of places. But because of the current initial cost in a lot of places around Egypt, this is a barrier, financial barrier to people to adopt clean water. So summing water as a service and microfinance or installment facilitation, either from the government or from intermediate financial organizations.
So how do you see this like mobilization happening, Mohannad? So like, I mean, in the first example, actually, I think my understanding, both examples would be like directly the financing going to the individuals or the households that are actually in need of these interventions or support. So is there like a bigger picture that you can like more on the like a community level or a more regional within Egypt, I mean, to finance like these projects on a bigger scale maybe, or you think this is like an individual basis is better, like a bottom up kind of approach?
Yeah, it's in the individual level when we are talking about connecting water inside the homes, but in many other places the water is connected but it's not clean. So then the individual level will not work at that point. And on the community level, what we do as Life from Water, we implement the water treatment unit as a charity, so they don't pay anything. But the community itself, they gather themselves and other community. We give them the capacity building and training, and they cover the running cost of that treatment unit, all the consumables and so on. And they not sell water, but they deliver water to the houses far from the treatment unit, and they can get revenue based on that. So with the treatment unit community based, you are talking about each treatment unit can serve more than 10,000 people in that village, and can be doubled. So there is a lot of potential profit that the community can get, and it will be a value-added relationship. So both the individual and the local non-profit, or and it's not always a non-profit. There's a lot of commercial water treatment units that are being done in places around Egypt to sell affordable alternative clean water. So this is how the private sector in that field, working with the rural communities, can intervene. In addition to that, of course, the larger scale treatment unit, but here you will not directly can relate to the people in the rural communities.
Very clear and helpful. Thank you very much, Mohannad. Hamis, so how do you see the role or the needed support from the private sector, both as like the fintech startups or smaller scale companies, and as well as the bigger corporates or multinationals? What is the role that needed in financing climate resilience projects in Egypt?
Okay, so let me mention 3 categories. I will start with the first one, which is the banks and financing from the banks. I would say this is one of the major sources of financing, of course, because the banks are the one responsible for financing in the end. But when it comes to having regulation that is more adaptable, more agile, in order to have startups being able to get this money from the banks and also financing the small farmers or like other projects that is maybe not 100% meeting the qualifications or like the list of checks, the list of papers needed. So this is one of the major sources that we need. Banks, actually, more banks are interested, whether it's the national banks or international banks, are interested into financing impact financing or resilient projects and small farmers in particular. But also more efforts need to be done in this area to adapt for the communication and adapt for the long run of the system like this. In order to get a financing from a bank, it's a very, very long chain of papers and time. And to loosen this and like to shorten this time, it's going to be more efficient. The other part is going to be the impact financing and the grants. So I believe that different entities like the USAID, the GIZ, and other international entities are now interested into impact financing. So they're financing the startups or like the companies that has an impact and like a social impact or environmental impact. And in return, they're not waiting for you. It's not a lending mechanism. It's not a lend financing. It's a grant in the end. And they want to inject this money into a community that is more resilient, more adaptable, more taking mitigation and into climate mitigation and trying to adapt or like implement steps that is more helping the small farmer, helping the community, helping the environment. And the impact financing is one of the major sources of financing. And the third part is the CSR. So I believe that the mega companies, the international companies, PepsiCo, Unilever, etc., they have a very huge CSR departments. And those CSR departments had a major role to play in this sector, in this area. I would say instead of giving money to charity, which is important, of course, to give money to charity, but maybe you can mobilize some of this money to subsidize the cost of a loan for a farmer, or maybe to act as a guarantor if the farmer is defaulted. Us as a startup, we're the one responsible for the farmer if he's defaulted because of quality, because of quantity, etc. But having a guarantor in the chain is important to share the risk, because the risk was once on the farmer, 100% on the farmer. Now there is Muzara and other fintech startups trying to share the risk with the farmer, and also there is a bank trying to share the risk. But also if there is a guarantor, now the risk is like 25% divided overall the system, so it's not like a burden on any of those entities. And I believe this more business sustainability and more impact as it's more shared. So those are the 3 main areas I see the interventions as really important and crucial in order to nourish this kind of projects in Egypt.
Very insightful, Hamis. Thank you for this. Nouran, so what do you think? So let's start like what is the kind of financial support you think needed from the private sector, and like I elaborated, from all different parts of the private sector?
Okay, so I'm going to say something that is a little bit different and might be a little bit controversial, but I don't believe that it's the private sector's role to provide financing. It's not really where they come in. The private sector in this context could maybe finance or drive research, actually converting or materializing the academic efforts to serve industry. And this is where private sector can come in to finance research projects, to finance research institutes or efforts that can basically improve the sector. I believe that the private sector could come in more here as a participant in the development because they often can afford more advanced and newer services, which in turn, like the case with any technology or any development, the more it is used, the better it becomes, the cheaper it becomes, and the cycle starts improving. So for me, the private sector can foster research or drive research. It can foster the development of technology and the uptake of newer endeavors because they can simply take the risk. But to be honest, I don't think financing is necessarily their role, but their role in securing the financing or enabling the financing is highlighting economic opportunities, because private sector or businesses in general are the ones who are most capable of creating positive economic cases. So their role here is to highlight how we can basically utilize finances, or how the government can utilize finances to improve a certain sector, or to launch a certain program that can be economically positive with positive impact on the society, on the GDP, on water consumption, on food production, and so on. So they can basically be the driver, but not necessarily the money bag, more or less.
I like your point very much, actually, and I think some of our participants, our audience, are actually agreeing as well. And I would like to pick up with you on this point in my next question.
I want to add also.
Go ahead.
Sorry.
Go ahead, Hamis.
No, please. No, because what Nouran mentioned is exactly what I was trying to say, that the source of financing cannot be the private sector alone. It needs to be injecting money through the private sector into the developing of this kind of projects and into the small farmers, into communities, but not the main sources like from our own pocket as a private sector to finance the small farmer or to finance those kinds of projects. It's a way to create more impact. It's the startup who's understanding the customer. We're the one understanding the behavior of the small farmer more than a bank in a way. But this understanding is not just to give them money, it's to better offer them, and also to go to the bank and give them a list of, this is the KYC of the small farmer. We want you to help this farmer by financing us to finance them. So it's a channel rather than a source. And this is what I wanted to highlight, also adding to what Nouran was saying.
Thank you, Hamis. So before I pick up on this point, actually, which paves the way to my next question, I would like to hear also Nada's thoughts on the role of the private sector in financing the climate resilience projects in Egypt.
I think the private sector is essential, but of course it does not take place on its own. It cannot work on its own, especially in Egypt. It's a government-led, state-led country where it's mostly top-down systems followed. So I think they come hand in hand. And for example, Egypt's Financial Regulatory Authority producing the green bond, which is like a bond that would support the environmentally friendly projects and so on. However, in my opinion, I feel like the focus is mainly on the clean transportation and water management systems. I think a pitch of that should be distributed over to other potential areas, even if in a minor percentage, along with the finances by the non-bank financial intermediaries. These are very important, as well as like the greater financial inclusion by advancing fintech and so on. Also, I think one of the essential things that I think we lack is the developing of relevant legal frameworks, and including like crowdfunding and e-payments. Although it's one of the part of the transformation that Egypt is trying to provide and produce and create within our day-to-day life. However, it still needs a lot of support. So I think the private sector is essential. However, it does not work on its own, especially in our context. It needs the government, and it needs some loosened regulatory for them to be able to enter the market and actually affect. Yeah, so yeah.
This is a very important point, Yanada, and actually, definitely it's part of the in a couple of questions. Definitely, we'll ask about the anticipated or the needed role of the government to help overcome the barriers for investment and mobilize the finances. But before we go to the role of the government, I would like Nouran, I would like to probe a little bit more. On your very interesting and important point. So the way I see it is there are two ways to see it, right? So first, like investing in climate resilience could be perceived as a business opportunity, actually. So it's not just financing something that they have no that the private sector has no role in, or like no responsibility for, right? Like a public good, more or less, right? So it's because of actually the anticipated, or actually the existing started now the existing climate hazards and risks. They definitely impact in so many different ways that the entire value chain that in the end of the day poses a business risk on different companies depending on their scales. So it could be like regional, or like micro on the micro level, or even on the multinational level, right? So let me put it this way: the private sector support now, they need to treat this as a business risk that they need to step in and help overcome, or like at least, I'll put it this way, mitigate or adapt to, or be resilient towards, right? So that's a way of seeing it, of seeing it, and I would love to hear your thoughts. It's a different point of view, like it's the counter argument in a way, right? And so do you want to start with this one? So that's the first thing.
Okay, so in general, I'm a person who believes that with every challenge, there is an opposite opportunity in it. And I think this is the case with climate resilience, for instance, techniques or technologies in general. But from my point of expertise, which is hydroponics, for instance, and this was exactly why we were able to talk with financial institutions and explain to them that this is a lower risk than other risks that they cover in the agriculture sector, for instance, because with climate resilient technologies like hydroponics, you're actually having much higher guarantees on your production. You're having much higher mitigation techniques installed that enable you to have a somewhat secure profitability that is actually much, much higher than traditional agriculture because of the productivity and the water savings and the fertilizer savings and all of this. And most importantly, because this comes in the form of a technology, of an asset. This is kind of different than what they're used to, for instance, in the agriculture sector. Because, for instance, if the bank now is providing me with a loan to finance a facility, a hydroponic production facility, and for whatever the reason is, this grower defaulted or this operation did not really succeed for whatever the reason is, the bank is actually able to seize most of their investment from the asset that is still there, which they can actually take back or resell to someone else and so on. So, and I think this is the case with so many different options. Even if we look, for instance, at a much smaller scale or something much less complicated. Now, if I'm financing IoT solutions to be deployed in farms. So now this is maybe a small cost, but it is also still possible that the grower is not really able to still pay his debts and so on. The government can still go and take back that piece of equipment. And that in and of itself mitigates a big part of the risk. But all of this is now only possible because the level of awareness of the financial institutions is becoming higher with the help of so many entities that are trying to push for this. Yani, it is a fact that still so many banks, for them, endeavors that are towards sustainability are still very unfamiliar, very high risk. But this is mainly because they're not really familiar with it. They do not really understand the impact or the economics or something like that. But with the effort of many entities, for instance, like the EBRD has an office that is dedicated to work with banks to assess and evaluate the risk of these types of investments that the banks are not really familiar with. And this is the case with many different entities. This is what kind of enables us to start implementing or utilizing such frameworks like financial frameworks and so on to boost this adoption rate and have more showcases on the ground of success stories and adoption rates that have clear and validated economic impact, improvement to the quality or improvement to the overall situation of the business. So yeah, that's kind of
Thank you, Nouran. So the other part was actually, given that in Egypt's updated NDCs, we see that the Egyptian the government has put around like an estimate of 50 billion US dollars, right, for the implementation of the adaptation, the needed adaptation projects by 2030, right? So definitely the public sector funding and international governmental organizations with their other different arms, etc., wouldn't be enough. I mean, like, definitely in another way, we need to have the private sector support this. So even if it's a bit controversial, or not, let me put it this way, not all companies or businesses would see it as a direct threat to or a business risk that they need to jump in and finance, right? Like you were saying, it's some would see it, it's different, right? It's a very different thing. How can we make them intervene more? Because we need this if we are to build the needed climate resilience by 2030.
Okay, I don't really think that you make them intervene. What happens is that this presents an economic opportunity and businesses seek economic opportunities. So once you create the economic incentive, they're going to jump in because they want to seize this action that is going on, this booming sector that is taking place. And maybe now our awareness of how many entities or businesses actually serve this sustainability transition or this resilience transition is quite limited because there hasn't been so much focus. But on the ground, there are a lot of entities who are working on this, whether it was private sector, international organizations, so many different institutes. But with the attention that is now actions and the projects that are being implemented on the ground, with the different endeavors that the government is doing, with the different actions, basically events like COP and so on. So I think it's just a matter of maturity in the process. Just like it will happen, it will all fall into place, but it will take some time.
Thank you very much, Nouran. We'll pick up more when we talk about the support we need from the government or the other non-state actors. So thank you for your valuable contribution. I see that Ragy has managed finally to overcome the technical issues. So Ragy, welcome, and you actually managed to join on the heated on the spot on part of the panel. So actually, I would love to hear your thoughts in the renewables sector that you work on. So your thoughts on the role actually of the private sector, the way you see the role of the private sector in financing climate resilience projects in Egypt, and how can we and what is the support needed to mobilize more financing from the private sector, to put it this way?
Okay, hello Gasser, hello everyone. I can see here Mohannad, Nouran, and Hamis. Hello everyone. So the role of the private sector, it is actually, in my opinion, it is divided into two parts. The role of the companies that will be selling a service or an end product to clients, for example, a renewable energy service or a renewable energy system. And the other part is the financing partner. Either this financing partner is a bank or non-banking sector like consumer financing companies and so on. In the past few years, we started to see banking sector starting to finance the solar energy projects, for example, under many schemes or from many resources. Some of them based on international financing, like Nouran mentioned the EBRD and the Green Economy Financing Facility project that have been there for the last 3 or 4 years, where the EBRD has given some money to local banks like Alex Bank, Agriculture Bank, and NBC to finance some projects in the solar energy sector. And the other part is the central bank has made an initiative of 5% interest and 7% interest so that SMEs could be financed if they need anything related to the green and sustainability. However, if you have noticed what I said, this financing doesn't serve startup companies. So for example, if you are in a startup company and you need to receive not you receiving a fund, but financing your consumer. Your consumer should be a company. Okay, so this is one of the challenges. However, other companies like small companies, startup companies, they tend first to serve individuals in the first place rather than serving institutions or serving or giving their products to factories or malls and so on. So the challenge is, although there have been some maturity in the past few years regarding the financing green projects, either it is being to the end users, financing the end user, individuals or SMEs, or financing the company itself, there have been some challenges that individuals who have no incorporated companies, like farmers, need to be empowered more or on a more level, much more than we see now, actually. And from the other side, startups themselves should have less eligibility requirements by those banks to be financed, okay? And when we talk about impact investment or impact financing or green financing, it should not go the way other classic or corporate financing happens. So we advise that it is not necessarily that banks should have like 3 financial statements and companies should have been like having at least 12 million or 15 million Egyptian pounds as a revenue so that they could be financed. Of course, other initiatives came in, like the MISMEDA initiatives for supporting very small projects, including startups and so on. But let me tell you what happens in the behind the scenes. That I am a startup and I have a factory, and I require a debt financing of 10 million Egyptian pounds. And after you wait up to 10 months due diligence process, you receive 2 million Egyptian pounds. Okay, so it's still also, it's not only about how much financing or the requirements, it is also about the rate of financing and how fast are you going to receive this financing. Because am I a startup applying for financing for a bank or from MISMEDA, for example, if I'm going to wait for 1 year to just have like 5 million Egyptian pounds to buy some machines in the factory or something, most probably within this period, I would have been approaching other financing opportunities. So this is about the maturity, and also quickly about the challenges. I'm not sure if I answer your questions, Gasser, but feel free, please, to raise any inquiries to me. Thank you.
Thank you. This is very helpful, and it sheds light on the challenges that that startups face in during or in order to receive the financing, right? Or to be more specific, specifically to receive loans from the financing entities, including banks, right? So that's very helpful. So how do you see the role of the big businesses, the corporations, again, that are not directly linked or not immediately linked to the renewable sector? So how do you see their role in also financing the climate resilience, the inevitable, the vital climate resilience projects in Egypt? So how do you see their role, and how can we actually include them or make it attractive to them to invest in this very needed area?
Well, this is a very broad question. You know, there's a lot of answer for that. It depends on what do you mean by the role. So they have a role or a responsibility to themselves first, being a green company trying to apply some sustainability approaches, a factory that has an international, it's an international company and has a sustainability vision or a plan to, let's say, apply some energy efficiency in the factory, or maybe have some solar energy projects over the roof. This will be nice. This will be okay for themselves, although they will not be mitigating a lot. But their main role actually should go to those who need it most. So for example, the role could be right now. What I see from big companies in the private sector is that they're trying to cope with the sustainability mainstream, but only on themselves, like in their facilities. Okay, but I'm not sure. I haven't been seen any big company that trying to also serve those who need. Or the less served communities, for example, when it comes to sustainability. I mean, giving grants or funding, and even it happens on pilot phases, or the other thing, or the other side is greenwashing, but not very effective. But let's answer your question from what is happening internationally, globally. Okay, so and maybe this could be applied in Egypt. So global companies like carbon emitting companies, for example, like airlines and so on, they try to purchase or buy what's so-called carbon credits. They buy it from small projects all over the world that they are mitigating carbon. So let's say that we have a clean energy company, and they are doing projects all over Egypt. So they hire a consultant or an intermediate company that can actually buy carbon credits and give the money to those end users or the company, let's say farmers or so on. And because they have carbon neutrality plans, and they will not be able to achieve these carbon neutrality plans, or one of the ways is to buy carbon credits. And that way they can look into the developing world and startups or any initiatives that can have any calculated or well evaluated carbon energy or carbon credits, and they can buy it. This could be one of the roles or one of the methodologies that could be followed by private companies in Egypt. But so far, as I told you, it's only for the facilities itself or the company itself, but not affecting like others, or considering others, especially for such very limited and short time initiatives that is not sustainable. And sustainability, when you have a role in something like green, is extremely important, because sustainability means continuity. And if this doesn't happen, then it is just, for me, in my humble opinion, it's just a greenwashing. Thank you.
Thank you. Very helpful, Ragy. Thank you very much. So Hamis, to pick up from the last point, Hamisa, you're still there, right? Oh, okay. Now I see. So you agreed. Actually, you are of the position that businesses, big businesses that are not directly related to the agricultural sector, their role is more of a catalyst, right? To transfer technical expertise, or to, in a way, make the market more investment worthy, or to facilitate the credit or this kind of being a catalyst. But what about? So how yeah, I mean, like, how can we make it, as I asked Ragy and Nouran before, so how we can make it a business opportunity? So one, we can, I mean, there's this point of view that still sees that the entire value chain, or the entire, or even like economy, if not supported by these needed resilience projects, will eventually cost the businesses a good part of their revenues across the value chain. So in one way or another, there are many ways that we don't like not get into it now, but I mean there are so many ways that this will definitely eventually will pose a direct risk on the business value chain. Also, in another way, even if this is not the case, or like not immediate risk, or like imminent one, that makes it investment worthy. How can we make it an attractive? You mentioned the CSRs, right? What else? How can we make it more like an attractive investment opportunity area for businesses, in order to eventually like raise the needed financing, or mobilize the needed financing for those critical climate resilience projects in Egypt?
Okay, so as Nouran mentioned, once a business sees an opportunity, they go and seek it, because it means revenue for them, but also it means doing good and doing well. So they can do well as a business, and they can do good by investing in the agriculture, or investing in the environmental impacted projects, society impact projects, etc. So I believe making those kind of initiatives less risky and more sustainable is one way to attract investment from different entities. And I wanted to highlight something here. In Egypt, we don't have some sort of a crop insurance model, agricultural insurance model, which is one insurance that is available in every country, different African countries. They do suffer from different risks than that we have in Egypt, because of the floods, the rain, of the droughts, but also we're not far from there based on the climate change, and based on the high heat waves and the pests that are not controlled, and new pests, as Nouran mentioned, and the map is changing for the agriculture. But also, I believe one of this risk mitigation way to make the agriculture more attractive is working on a model that is kind of guaranteeing the farmer, the one who's got the money, of the one who's using the energy, if this farmer is using water, if the farmer is using new irrigation techniques, etc., is defaulting, then they have another backup of a crop guarantee, of a crop insurance model that can help them in case of defaulting. And this kind of net, will act as a net. If the farmer is falling, there is a safety net that can have him and have his back, and they can pay this money back in a way, or like a percentage of it. I think we need both the insurance companies and both businesses to think about how to have a business model, or like an insurance model for the agriculture sector that is more tailored to the Egyptian conditions, and that can act as a safety net for both the farmers and the lender and the guarantor and the financing agency also. It might be one of the solutions.
Thank you. Very insightful, Hamis. Mohannad, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, so I am very happy that Ragy joined at this point and mentioned the green ocean part, because this is for the private sector, for the non-governmental, for all. Now, because of the COP and because of if I may say, the trend of the climate change, many people, many organizations, we just the effort in that sector is just talking about the issue, not just implementing. And even with the private sector and the CSR, if we may say, there have to be a regulator, some party that can regulate, assess if that private sector or any organization is actually doing what it's doing in that area of the climate resilience. Because with the CSR, the CSR, as Nouran and Hamis said, the CSR itself, it can be a business aligned CSR practices that's aligned with my own resources, and I can get profit from that as well. Not just general awareness or any general matter for PR purposes, which is widely, unfortunately, done by many organizations and private sector organizations. So, and the same with the funding organization. So any funds coming to that sector is coming through intermediate funding organization. And at the end, there is a lot of stuff that we can talk about because there is no regulator, there is no intermediate companies that assess how good they are doing and how positively they're impacting the climate and the startups and so on. So if that is not done, then at the end we'll just be talking about the issue, and anyone can say whatever he wants, but there is no ecosystem in order to regulate what are the steps that all of us collectively done and what need to be done collectively. I think this is very important as the other technical part, but here in Egypt, and I think all of us have similar experiences and knowledge of that without that regulation on the big level, there will not be, we will not go fast enough, we will not go efficient enough toward the action, either as a private sector, as a startup, as a non-profit sector, or whatever the sector.
Thank you. Very important point, actually, Mohannad and also Ragy, who actually raised. Sure, please.
Can I add something very small to Mohannad what was said? This entire transition has to somehow be driven by governmental frameworks to support it. And a very good example for this is the UAE. Taking again the example of hydroponics, for instance, it has become a rising trend, for instance, in the UAE because of the governmental effort. And all of this started when the government started having frameworks in place that support climate smart agriculture. And then they started having programs where they facilitate securing land and financing the operations and providing huge funds. That even not, this did not necessarily mean that the transition was very smooth and that every project that was implemented was successful for so many challenges. But at the end of the day, despite the default and the failures, the industry is developing in the UAE. All the companies that are working in hydroponics are now interested to work in the UAE because they are able to basically adopt this technology, boost it, finance it, and try different things out until they find the perfect recipe for them. So if the government starts implementing frameworks and discussing policies that basically push this forward, we're going to start seeing a lot of development on the ground, especially that specifically the agri-tech sector in Egypt is actually a very good sector. It's simply underfunded and under the radar, if I can say so. Because we have so many good calibers that are working on this sector that they serve as experts all over the world, not just in Egypt or in Africa or in the GCC. They serve as superb experts in so many countries of the world. And in Egypt, we have so many perks and positive aspects, for instance, like low costs, like access to so many raw materials and so many different things that can enable us to have a very strong agri-tech sector. But this requires the support of the government, the support of the policy framework that basically incentivizes the growers to do this transition and benefit from it. And also the financial sector in this case will be very keen to take part in this opportunity, basically, because at the end of the day, all of these are financially driven entities, whether it was the government, it was the financial sector, or it was the private sector, or even the grower. So everyone here is looking at the gain and the opportunity. And what we're seeing now is that there are a lot of opportunities that just need to be somehow highlighted and formulated in policies, basically, that support them to take off.
Super helpful, and very. I think it's very actionable and clear. Actually, policy intervention needed. So thank you for highlighting this one. So Nada, what quickly, because of it, we would like to actually go and open the questions. So what are your thoughts, Nada, on, again, back on if you have any further or additional thoughts on ways to mobilize financing from the private sector and the required policy interventions or government support.
I think I would like to add to everyone who spoke that although Egypt has a handful of incubators that support entrepreneurs, and there are all the rising startups are mostly green startups or clean startups. They account for approximately 5 to 7%. But I think the problem is, or the issue that we face currently, is that there is no monitoring or an evaluation system, a unified one that is nationally placed. And I think that is one of the main goals of the national climate change strategy, placing a monitoring, reporting, and verification system. Once that is in place, I think the unified or the national efforts collectively from within the private sector, public sector, civil society, startups, and so on, SMEs, and so on, would be accounted for. And that would attract the private investments, whether foreign or direct or whatever. This will also help Egypt to increase in the level of the efforts. There's a lot of efforts. There's a lot of projects that are implemented within Egypt that are not known of. And this is a problem because of no monitoring or evaluation system. Once the monitoring system is there and it's verified according to, of course, the Paris Agreement and all of the other international agreements that we've signed to, that would help us to build a proper GST system and become part of what's happening with the world. We start becoming included with the big discussions, the GST process, becoming a part of seeing the impact of us as a country where there's a lot of, where agriculture and irrigation, and of course, as they've spoken, they are experts in their fields, is the most risky areas within Egypt. So yeah, I think once a monitoring system is there, within the policies, it's out there, it's implemented, it's actionable, and not only within the strategy that is drafted without any implementation action plan, that would help showcase the ongoings. So yeah, I think that's my point.
Very helpful, Yanara. Thank you. So before we open the questions to the audience, any final thoughts? So, in general, or on the support needed from the public sector or from the government. So far, we have regulations, needed regulations or policy interventions on the water usage, data sharing in agriculture, and then climate risks and weather forecasts. Even I think so. Data sharing. Greenwash, there has to be some sort of a governance system for maybe disclosure requirements or and monitoring of this, creating via regulation, creating investment frameworks that definitely would enable everybody to be clear and coordinate and create a common ground for investment among the various actors. Finally, what Nada mentioned, the monitoring and evaluation system also is definitely very much needed. Any final thoughts on ways or needed interventions to help mobilize finances from the private sector, I believe, or infuse or inject more investments into climate resilience projects?
Can I add a point?
Sure.
I think to the MRV system, I think I've missed that point, comes hand in hand with data collection. We've just in 2022 started to have one authorized entity to collect data nationally. and that's the cap mass. They're still starting creating a whole unit for the climate change effects. They're still hiring experts. It's still 100% new. So I think we're moving forward. However, it's late. It's a bit late, but it's better late than never, I think. So yeah, I think data collection and think tanks is a necessity to be placed here in Egypt. Think tanks are very rare in Egypt, and I think we lack at that point. So yeah, I think that's my point.
Thank you. Very, very helpful point. And actually, as the other speakers also mentioned, research, right? So lots of research is still needed on the local, on the national Egyptian level, and across the different sectors and communities. So definitely, that's a very good point. Thank you, Nada. So I'd like to now open the platform, the space for questions from the audience. If anybody has a question, please raise your hand and or just go ahead. Feel free. Okay. Any questions?
Gasser, sorry for interrupting, but I wanted to say one final thing since we have here.
Sure.
We have here actually rising startups like Waterwell, Plug and Grow, and also Mozera. There is something that I really believe in. It's something that I have been believing in for the last few years. I have applied with other startups, and it became to be quite successful. That green startups, since we have a problem with the financing and the support of the ecosystem to green startups when it comes to financing the startup or financing its clients or targeted clients. A very powerful technique to tackle this is that green startups should work together. Yeah. They should really work together. They should really stand together. I can see here 4 startups that were working in the water, energy, food nexus topics, and they have an extremely huge potential to really work together. For example, I'm so proud with NoorNation collaboration with Mohannad and Waterwell. It's really very fruitful collaboration, to be honest to say, and both companies, both teams, and both startups are sharing their experiences. And actually, when it comes to technical products or even the business model itself, to do something great. And even those startups, if you have problem with local financing, there is a huge potential for international financing organizations or international development organizations, or even some VCs outside of Egypt that need to see consortium of companies coming together. Consortium of companies, yeah. So it would be really nice if we consider this, put this on the table. What kind of green startup that I will need to, or green company that I need to collaborate now in order to add value, to create mutual benefits to both of us, and also to create something new, and to tackle a problem that haven't been tackled before. Even if they will do like a prototype, then they will get the financing themselves from any other institutions. So I'm so glad and proud here to be among Mozera, Hamis, and Nouran again, and Mohannad. And this is the final thing that I want to say. And thank you so much, you guys.
Thanks a lot. That's a very, very insightful and actually important point, Ragy. Thank you very much. So, Mohannad, since Ragy specifically mentioned NoorNation, Waterwell. So how and the question goes for everyone, right? I'll start with Mohannad, but please take a minute to think about it. What are the barriers for this green consortium or like coalition building, or like green company, small startups in the green, so like in different sectors, but they all have to share the same climate or resilience in the end of the day goals or sustainability goals. So what are the barriers? What is needed for them to come together? As in the way that Ragy said, which eventually would make them in a way pave the way for both the framework, the right framework and the coordination to take place, and eventually, or in parallel, hopefully, we don't have to wait, inject finances from the private sector. So, Mohannad, what do you think?
I think the main barrier here would be the mental barrier. So as startup, if the startup, see, as Ragy said, if the startup is seeing this as an opportunity or as a threat, so having the collaborative mentality of working with, seeing the other startups as potential partners, not as competitors, this is the main. When I think of like this way, there's a lot of open that will be open, because at the end, as Ragy said, and likewise, we are very proud of partnering with NoorNation for that, with their live box solution, because doing this, a lot of benefits, business development benefits, and if each startup use its own resources, we can save the overall resources. So, for example, for myself, I will need that amount of investment in order to have an accumulated experience in the energy, in this and this and this, to start doing this solution. And the opposite with the other organizations. So if we partner together, the amount of money we need to do work will be less, and we will need more business development in not a lot of finances to work together, and not just business development, but we can work in other sectors. We can enter new markets. So I think this is very important, because at the end, as I mentioned in the beginning, we can't just talk about water or food or energy. As Ragy said, it's the water, energy, food, taxes. And this is on the startup level, on the private sector level, on the governmental level. If we don't think of the three of them as one piece, that we collaborate and we complement that with each other, there is something wrong with that. So I think the collaborative mentality is the key point, and then sitting together in conferences and panels like this, discovering what startups that share my values, how we can integrate with startups, how we can, even if we are in the same industry doing the same products, how can we collaborate? Because not just in that, even if we 100% do the same products, collaborating together, sharing experience together, maybe at some point of time I have a client, I don't have the resources, I can refer. So there's a lot of dynamics and potential between different partners. I can say that there is high-level external barriers for this, as we are saying since we are beginning, but on this level, I think the mentality, the business mentality and the collaborative mentality is the key to a lot of potential. And if we do this, we will not depend on external finances in the strong way that we are depending now, but we will organically grow together.
Thank you very much. I think it's a very important key message. So Hamis, in addition,
I was already going to come in the line.
Okay, you're ready. Go ahead.
Adding to Mohannad and Ragy, it's some of it is the way of thinking and the mentality barrier, but also it's the capacity barrier. Like us in the startup, we're working 24/7 in different projects and trying to move the business and take it forward. And we need to take time to concentrate on the other people in the value chain, other startups, other players in the market, and how we can work together, and actually dedicating time and effort to do so, because all of us are totally consumed within our business, and we need to also be a bit having time to think about the whole value chain, the whole ecosystem, and how we can make more by partnering together, as they mentioned, of course. So it's a call for me and my colleagues here and everyone else. Give the time to think about others, not just your own day-to-day operations and your business, to take it forward. Yeah. Thank you.
That's great. I really love the collaborative spirit, honestly. I look forward to this being a follow-up. So Nouran, your thoughts?
Well, I definitely support everything Ragy, Mohannad, and Hamis mentioned. But I disagree with Mohannad a little bit on the challenge regarding mindset, because I think there's a big number that are working in the agri-tech or sustainability tech or clean tech sphere. And to a great extent, we come from different mindsets or approaches, and we have similar interests, and we're all facing the same challenges, more or less. But we really lack is the platform. Last year, for instance, I think it was last year, we started this very little initiative of startups or clean tech startups coming together, and actually Nada and Hamis were both part of it at that time. And we started trying to bring together everyone so that we can explore what are the common challenges and what we can work on together to bring about our work, our products, and everything else. We were not really able to fulfill this plan the way we imagined. As Hamis said, it's a huge barrier in regards to resources and time and other kinds of work. But we have sustained the habit of a few channels that we use since then. We've created like a WhatsApp channel where we exchange things. There's a mailing list where we also exchange things. We do periodic calls with the focus groups of them, for instance, energy sectors. We have created actually collaborations and showcases out of it. But the main challenge is that this needs a dedicated team to basically keep working on this and taking it forward. And that's a huge commitment that maybe none of us were able to fulfill so far. But I'm certain something like this, at least we're going to be interested to continue working on something like this in the future. We're not really clear on how, but we're trying to sustain the connections and the communication and the participation. A result of this was that we partnered with 3 other startups that are working in the sector. After that, we established further connections with other supporting entities, because most of us, yes, are in the same clean tech domain, but each of us actually is an expert at a certain point of the value chain. So there isn't really reason for competition. There's reason for collaboration and reason for showcasing all of this and trying to overcome the common challenges. Because, for instance, data is a challenge for everyone. Even if we're competitors, that having access to data for everyone is going to help everyone. So I think it's a work in progress. Maybe we'll see something come up next. Maybe YouThinkGreen carries on this huge vision on behalf of all of us.
I think definitely we would be interested. Definitely. Thank you so much for this. Nada, any final thoughts before I wrap up?
I think Nouran summed it all up, because I was working with her at that time. So it's exactly what you said, that there are common challenges. Data is a common challenge. It was very nice to see everyone come together with the collaborative spirit. However, the problem was, who's going to provide the solutions? Who's going to take the initiative, and who's going to stick to it? And it's like you need an enforcement to stick to it, with, of course, with every other responsibility and all the other projects that's going on at the same time in parallel. So yeah, I don't think I have any extra comments to what Nouran and Hamis have said.
I agree. Well, very well put, everyone. And guys, thank you. Seriously, thank you, Nouran, Nada, Hamis, Ragy, and Mohannad. It's been really a pleasure to be among inspiring leaders of the future, actually, of the clean tech industry in sector in Egypt. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for everybody who attended, and for CDKN and South North for organizing this session. And hopefully we'll see more of this and more collaboration. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Hassan.
thank you, everyone. It's been
Thank you.
Yes, this has been really fascinating. It's been a wonderful opportunity to really understand about the real world challenges in financing, and also the opportunities of peer exchange and communities of practice. So thank you very much.